Hi, can you hear me okay? Awesome. Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well. This is already, what, day 10, day 11? We cannot count the day anymore, but we're at the very tail end. It's a pleasure to see you all today for this session. Water is the climate challenge. That's what we're going to talk about for the next 90 minutes or so. I'm very, very pleased to be here. My name is Franck Gbaguidi. I'm the Director for Sustainability with Eurasia Group. Eurasia Group is a political risk research and advisory firm, and as part of my work with the firm, I cover nature, I cover plastics pollution, and obviously, I cover water. Very, very excited about today's conversations because basically, what we're going to do as we are having the day that is dedicated to food, ag, and water, we are going to tackle the linkages between water and all of the other topics that you've heard about today, with a specific focus on companies, whether they are public or private. What I find particularly interesting in the climate space, and even more broadly in the sustainability space, is that water has been kind of like this big overlooked topic, right? Every year with my company, Eurasia Group, we put out a report with the top 10 geopolitical risks of the calendar year. And I had to fight to make sure that this year, for the first time in the firm's 25-year history, we had water stress as one of the top 10 risks of the year. And we had it. And unfortunately, when you look at what happened this year, we were very much so right to put it in there. And when you look at the outlook for the next couple of years, we know that by 2025, 2/3 of communities will be facing some sort of extreme water shortages. And equally, we also know that 2/3 of companies will face some sort of substantial water risk across their value chain. Right? So 2/3 of communities, 2/3 of companies. And yet, the topic has yet to kind of like rise to where it needs to be. Now, that being said, I do believe that we saw some changes this year. I'm sure that many of you were in New York in March for the UN Water Conference, which was the second water conference ever. So it was after almost like 50 years, which is kind of wild to say. And now, obviously, we have this dedicated Water Day here at COP. I am super thrilled to be covering those topics today, particularly with a focus on partnership and collaboration with a very, very strong panel. Today we have Adrien Portafaix, who's a partner with EY and who has had extensive experience with all of the big actors in the water space, whether they are older actors or newer actors. So from WWF to SBTN, a lot of work with the TNFD folks as well. So he'll be able to give us his color on all of those topics and new linkages. Also very excited to have Virginia Ribeiro, Head of Sustainability and Corporate Governance with Sabesp. A big thank you to Sabesp actually for convening this conversation. Speaking of which, by the way, the very end of this session, you can all collect this nice reusable cup at the bar over there. So please feel free to collect that on your way out. And Virginia will make sure to cover all of the great work that Sabesp is doing in that space and some of the challenges that they're facing as well. Super excited to have Michael as well. Welcome, coming all the way from Singapore. Every time clients ask me questions about who's doing well, you know, at the government level on the water side, I always have to give the example of Singapore, right? So it's only fair that we have Michael, who is a representative and director with PUB, the National Water Agency in Singapore, to be here today, and he'll be sharing some highlights and insights with all of us. And last but not least, I have Farid. Thank you so much for joining us, Executive Director with TAQA. We're very excited to have you because obviously you are based here in the UAE. You are part of an international company that is focusing both on the energy and on the water side, particularly on the generation side. So you'll be able to also tell us what it looks like to face those challenges on the UAE side, but also in the 20+ countries that your company is covering. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to get started with you, Adrien. I still think that we have a long, long way to go for the water topic to get to where it needs to be. But one of the good, actually, I guess, side of coming in late in the sustainability debate is that you have a blueprint, right? We've seen the TCFD on the climate side, we've seen SBTI, we've seen the climate COPs, and so there are now conversations to replicate that model elsewhere. The first question that I have for you, Adrien, is particularly when it comes to science-based targets, maybe for those who may not be aware of what they are, can you tell us what are science-based targets and why do we need them on the water side?
Sure, of course. So yeah, I'm here, representing colleagues at SBTN who have been working with for many years. SBTN is, as you said, very rightly replicating the approach that has been relatively, not sufficiently, but relatively successful at SBTI on climate. And the idea here is to have science-based targets on other planetary boundaries. Why is that? Because, of course, reducing carbon emissions in line with the 1.5 degree is necessary, but unfortunately, it's not sufficient, right? We have a number of proof points that there are other natural cycles out there that are at risk of either through over-exploitation or emissions and pollution are at risk of getting out of balance, right? So Stockholm Resilience Center tells us that there are 9 planetary boundaries, and water is one of them. Now, very worryingly, while climate is sort of in the orange on its way to breaching the 1.5 degree, which is pretty bad already, 6 of the other planetary boundaries, including water, are already in the red, right? So these things are sort of almost more urgent, not trying to downplay the urgency on climate, of course, but we need to tackle all of them, and we need to tackle them now. So that's why we set out to develop science-based targets for other planetary boundaries, starting with water and land use. And that's in order to make sure that every single corporate and also local authorities will be able to operate within a safe space, right? And reduce its footprint to be within a safe space. So what does it look like? Maybe quickly. For water, so the bad news is climate is complicated, but water is even more complicated. So first of all, it is even more complicated because water is a local topic. It's a local resource. So where you have carbon that is fungible, it doesn't matter where you emit carbon. You just need to reduce it wherever it happens. Water is landscape by landscape, and more precisely by watershed or river basin, right? So it's very important because when companies or authorities say, I'm going to reduce my water footprint by 20, 30%, that's great, but be careful, where are you reducing? Because typically it's easier to reduce where there is no water stress, because that's the places where you haven't had to be efficient. So the places where you actually need to reduce are the river watersheds, river basins, areas where there is water stress. You probably have already made efforts, you need to go further. Yeah, so that makes it more complicated because it means many science-based target for each landscape. The second point that makes it complicated is, or slightly different, is water is a renewable resource, right? So it's not about, don't use water anymore, right? We can't function without using water. Fortunately, it's a cycle, it's a renewable resource. What we need to do is we need to use water where it's available within the safe and fair budgets that we have, right? And final point, which makes it quite tricky, is that budget needs to be allocated fairly between 3 different uses, right? Local ecosystems need that water, and we need to make sure we leave enough for those ecosystems to function. Secondly, water is a human right. We need to leave enough water for local communities, for people, right, as drinking water, etc. And thirdly, water is a very important commodity for agriculture, for industry, etc. And so we need to have water for those economic purposes because that's what's creating our economy, right? So all of these things make it tricky, but important, and now we have an approach to tackle it.
Thanks, Adrien. Maybe a bit of a follow-up question on this. You talked about how complex it is. So then who should set those science-based targets? And related to that one, and I can already think of maybe some of the corporate leaders who are in the room and even some clients of mine who will tell me, yet another kind of like round of targets that we have to set, yet another round. So is it transformational, and what concrete impact will it have on businesses?
Sure. The first quick answer is everybody should have a look at the SBTN corporate guidance. It is...
It came out in May. It came out in May of this year, no? On the water side.
So water methods came out earlier this year, and land methods later on in the year. So have a look. It is important for any corporate in any sector, because you might not feel like you have significant water use or water pollution in your own operations, but you might have in your supply chain. Some of your suppliers might be very reliant on water sources in places where it's at risk from a quality or quantity point of view. And you might have users of your products, of your services, also dependent on water. So it's very important to go through your value chain and understand where in that value chain you are using significant amounts of water, having an impact on water in places that has water risk. So that's one thing. It's also, as I said, not just for corporates. The methods are being developed also for local authorities so that they can tackle water in a science-based manner. Is it transformational? Yes, it's very transformational because in many basins, the reduction in water usage that's going to be needed to be in line with what the planet can handle is very, very significant, and it's not negotiable. It's just what the capacity of those river basins is. In fact, there is a framework for acting, which is in the SBTN guidance, which is called AR3T: avoid, reduce, restore, and transform. And so I would, if I simplify, organize it around three things. One is you need to reduce how much water you use proportionately to how much we collectively need to reduce how much is used in this area. So if you're in a place in South Asia that has a very, very significant water stress, there are periods in the year, because it's also seasonal, another complexity factor that I haven't mentioned, you're going to have to reduce by up to 90%, right? Because we need to reduce how much water we're pumping out of this aquifer or this river by that much. So that's already very transformational. There are solutions. Yeah, you can use water in a more circular way. You can use water in the right season. There are things you can do, but it's very significant in terms of reduction. Then on the restore, you can reduce the water you're using, but if that water source is in bad shape and climate change is coming, things will only get worse year after year. That you reduce how much you're using, but the supply of water is also going down. So you need to do something to fix the headwaters. You need to do something to restore the ecosystem so that water continues coming despite climate change. And finally, transform. Transform is about fixing the governance, essentially, fixing how water is used by people in this area. Because if you use less water and your neighbor says, hey, this is an opportunity, I can use a little bit more water now that my neighbor is being reasonable, then it undoes everything you're doing, right? It means that you don't fix the ecosystem, you don't fix the availability of water for communities, and your risk as a company is not reduced. So yes, it's very transformational in many ways.
Awesome, thank you so much, Adrien. I want to go to you, Virginia, next. We've heard Adrien say that water was very complex, but also that we could not do without it. With Sabesp, how do you navigate that tension, right, between providing those essential water services as one of the largest water utilities in the world by a long shot, and at the same time managing the environmental impact of your operations, particularly in a water-stressed environment?
So thank you, Franck. Thank you all to be here with, this very high-level discussion. So water, it's our core businesses, and we say water in every terms because the sewage is also water to be transformed, right? So Sabesp, we are based in São Paulo state in Brazil. We are today the second largest company in the world in terms of people served. So now we are covering a region with most like 12.8 million people. So within São Paulo state. And São Paulo this year complete 15 years of existence. So within this 20 years of existence, we are struggling to develop and deploy all the infrastructure in terms of water and sewage treatment in São Paulo state in Brazil. And we have faced so far a lot of challenges. So we have faced the biggest drought in São Paulo state in Brazil like 7 years ago. And was a process that we developed not only the resilience in terms of adaptation of our systems and in integration of the systems in terms of infrastructure, linear infrastructure also mainly, but also in terms of education. You know, when we did a lot of campaigns, we did a lot of social work with people to, you know, to reduce the use of water, to use the water wisely, because, you know, was something that when we have, you know, water scarcity, we impact not only the human usage, but also all the whole economy. As Adrien was saying, it's a commodity that also the industry and, you know, the local economy, it needs to be, you know, development. It's work day to day. So, and we had this case that was very successful. And along with this, we developed a lot of, you know, programs. So we have, you know, programs that aims to depollute the urban rivers, and also programs to expand our coverage, especially in high vulnerability cities. So in São Paulo, for example, São Paulo City, São Paulo is the biggest city in South America. We have, you know, this such a different environment, let's say. So we have wealthy neighborhoods, as well we have, you know, very poor neighborhoods, and we make sure that we deliver the same services to all of them. And look to the future. Now we are connecting all these efforts and all these knowledges and programs and experience that we have until now gathered to connect them with our corporate strategy. So we just passed through now to a renovation, let's say, in terms of, you know, culture and corporate structure. And so this is the first time that Sabesp has a full area dedicated to the sustainability and also to corporate governance. So I am the first leader of this area. And my role now is to make sure that we have, you know, the next 50 years, we're gonna also work in terms of sustainability, also in terms of financing, because we know that we still need a lot of influx of money going to Brazil, because we still are facing the challenges to universalize the services of access to clean water and sewage treatment. So, and we are working to see how we can, you know, address also the investors and also our shareholders, because we are also a listed company in New York. So we are a publicly held company in Brazil and outside of Brazil. So now we have this demand, let's say, to meet everything that we have already been done with these standards that we are looking now, because as Adrien also was saying, water is not on the top of the topics. Also, you were saying about it. So we are, you know, maybe as I see that we are very evolved in terms of the mitigation agenda, but we are not evolved in terms of water agenda. So a couple of days ago, I was talking with an investor, for example, just to give you this quick, just to tell you this quick story. And he was saying, you know, why you guys in Sabesp still not make the pledge to the net zero campaign? So I was telling him that as we are struggling with, you know, the universalization of the services, and consider that the sewage treatment plan, it's the most offensive in terms of methane emissions, where we should choose between, complete our job to make sure that every citizen in São Paulo state has sewage treatment, or should we now pledge with the net zero commitment? Because, the money comes just from one place. So we don't have, unfortunately in Brazil, especially in our environment, we don't have money to do everything at the same time. I hope we had, but unfortunately we don't. So we need to choose between, tackle the social issues that we have still in Brazil, or, commit with this agenda that is it's more discussed and is more well-known in terms of internationally speaking. So this is, just a slight view of, some of the challenges that we are facing Sabesp, but I'm very confident and optimistic that, we are evolving this agenda, especially after the new framework for water and sanitation in Brazil.
Thank you, Virginia. I like that you highlighted that tension, right, between, we know that in Brazil there's this target for 2033 of having universal access to water services. So you have that moonshot target, at the same time you're getting other pressures around other environmental priorities. And I always say that I think one of the biggest challenges coming up is going to be those trade-offs that you're going to have to make. Because sometimes your climate, biodiversity, and water goals and the way to get there go the same way. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they clash, and sometimes you're going to have to make very difficult decisions, and thinking through the rationale behind that is, I think, something that is a bit overlooked. So I'm glad that you highlighted this. Would be great to hear from Michael right now, because maybe he could share some insights from the Singapore perspective. We know, again, that Singapore has a very long-standing commitment on water issues. I think I remember, I think it was 2008, there was like a big water week there. You were involved. Yeah. And so it's while it may not be a priority elsewhere, it is very much so a priority in Singapore. Would love to hear from you some of the innovative water management solutions that you have put in place with PUB, and how could other countries and companies get inspired by that?
Good morning. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I've lost track of time and days. Thank you for having us here. And Frank, thanks so much for your kind words. Frankly, I'm humbled because I stand among giants here, and I think many of you are also leading your utilities, leading your organizations on this very important topic. So much as I'm sharing, I also hope to hear from you, your views, and perhaps some comments about what we are doing up here. So Virginia, thanks for inspiring us. I think you have a very big city to run. Singapore is a little bit different. We are just a small rock in the tropic, 700 square kilometers, just a rock, very flat. Our highest mountain is about 250 meters, so that's how high it is. But we are probably one of the most dense city in the world. And I think because of our natural constraint and what we have been dealt with, it forces us to think a lot harder in how we do things. And therefore, I think over the last 60 years since our independence, we have gone out to the world, we have gone out to speak to people, learn from people through platforms such as this, to see what are the best available solutions that can help Singapore to solve its problem. For those of you who do not know, Singapore is one of the most water-scarce countries in the world. We are at the bottom 3, so not very favorable conditions. So how do we then have enough water, have enough... Let me just share a few principles, perhaps that could be a little bit useful for all of us here, and I'm happy to hear your views. So one, we have certain principles that guide us. Like for example, we capture every drop of water that falls on Singapore. So we don't have big rivers like you. I think your smallest river is probably larger than my biggest river. So we try to capture every drop of water because that's what you have been given, right? But rain, as we know it, is going to continue to evolve into difficult challenges. Either you get too much or too little. Then what do? So we try as much to reuse every drop of water. And we capture every single drop of water, as a developing country in the beginning, we have separate collection for sewage and rainwater. And because we have such systems, we are now able to recycle water in a large way. Right? So that's what we do. So these principles help us to really go out, talk to the industry, talk to partners, to really frame the challenge. So that's what we did. And the other thing that we realized is that we do not have the monopoly of all the knowledge and the ideas. So you spoke about the Singapore International Water Week. That is really our idea to find out what's best out there, what is really leading out there, that Singapore. For those of you who kind of just walk past the mural behind there, can you please take a look at it? It is so important. From the what to the how to the what is next. Really, that's kind of, I thought it summarized what I had in mind. Because really we are dealt with a very challenging situation. We worked hard at doing it. And I think, Frank, you asked me, do you have any more challenges? I think Adrien asked me that as well. You know, because Singapore, we are an island and we are so flat. If the sea were just to rise 1 meter, we are goners. We lose about at least 25% of our land. So can you imagine what happens? So even today, while we have a good story to tell, we are really looking forward to what's next for us. And that's one critical area that we are doing. I think we are looking at protecting our coast. We are getting a lot more rain. We are trying to recover resources, waste to energy. We are trying to close the carbon loop. We are trying to close the energy loop because we rely a lot on desalination and recycling. So therefore, actually, while I'm here, half of me want to hear from you. So tell me what I can do and what Singapore needs to do. I think that would be most helpful for me. Over to you.
Thank you, Michael. And we'll make sure to have a Q&A session so that everyone can ask great questions to our great panel. I want to go to you, Farid, next and pretty much ask you the same question. Michael was just saying Singapore is kind of like all the way in the bottom when it comes to water scarcity. We know that it is the same for the UAE, but also for many countries in the Middle East. How do you deal with that, right? Like especially in the context of TAQA, how do you make sure that you move forward on the water production side and then still manage it in a very water stressed environment? And maybe related to this, if you also have any kind of like innovative techniques that you have put in place and that would be good to share with the audience, please feel free to do so.
Thank you, Frank, and I'm honored to be here amongst all of you, and I'm also honored as a UAE national to be also part of hosting this great event. You know, I've been to other COPs, and it's great to see how the world is coming around, you know, around important global topics, because these topics will not be solved by individual countries or people or companies, so it really is an international effort. And you're very humble, Michael. Singapore might be a rock, but the people of Singapore punch like a continent, you know, so you guys have been, you know, leaders in a lot of aspects, and we've all get inspiration as well from you. So thank you also for your contributions. And going back to the topic, the UAE is also in one of the most stressed regions in terms of water. I mean, and water is the essence of life. And I think water has always been, for as long as humans have been around, a very important topic. But I think for a while, especially during the industrial age, the rise of the industrial age, energy became maybe a little bit more of an important topic as, you know, countries and people started to looking for more, you know, larger scale energy sources to drive economic development. That water, I know, a little bit started falling to the sidelines, but I'm glad that it's actually come back again as an important topic, because in the UAE, we've always appreciated and understood how water is very important. So, and you know, 11 of the 17 most stressed countries in terms of water exist here in the Middle East. The Middle East has, you know, 10% of the world's population, but less than 2% of the world's rainfall. So the water is actually a very important topic for us. And in the UAE, we've been trying to innovate a lot on how to couple water and make sure that it is an important part of our development to ensure that the sustainability of also our economies and growing populations. So essentially, we started off with and fundamentally providing most of our drinking water and even industrial use water from desalination. So 50% of the world's capacity of desalination actually exists here in the GCC and predominantly between Saudi and the UAE. And we did this origin primarily through building these big energy power plants that are coupled with water. And at the time, that was the most efficient way of doing it, because as you produce power from conventional sources, you use the heat that comes out of it as well, that is usually wasted, to try and also produce water. So at the time, that was the most efficient. But as the story of emissions now started to rise, we started to think about, okay, how can we do this better? Even though we've done a lot to date, but we continuing as TAQA primarily, being the low carbon utility champion from the UAE, and the fact that we operate internationally as well, we started thinking, okay, how can we do better? So, and we realized that water and energy are intertwined, which is what a lot of people don't realize, right? In technical terms, we call it the water-energy nexus. So in lots of places in the world, water is essential to producing energy. But here in the UAE as well, it's also very important that energy to produce water because of desalination. So we're kind of central to how you solve this problem when you come to also sustainability. So we've done a lot. So there was, and that's where the area of collaboration also comes in. And as you mentioned, we cannot solve this just as one group of people. So we have to try and use the best knowledge and practices from all over the world to try and solve this problem. So what we've done is we started introducing, through knowledge sharing, best technologies. So we are proud to say that today we're building the world's largest and most efficient desalination plant, which is Tawil RO, with a 200 MIGD capacity, and that uses reverse osmosis technology. Why is this important? Because first of all, what we've done is we worked on decoupling water from water. As I mentioned before they were coupled. Now we are decoupling them from our conventional power plants and making these water production plants independent of the energy source. And using reverse osmosis, that's even much more efficient way of producing water than the original thermal processes. If I just give some high-level figures, it used to cost us 40 kilowatts per hour to produce desalinated water before. Using reverse osmosis, that's gone down to 4, right? That's a 10-fold increase. RO is like over 6.5 times as a technology more efficient than all the other technologies present, and reduces emissions by 85% if you're talking only conventional energy supplied to them. But that also goes to another topic. RO being now decoupled from conventional means it's agnostic to the energy sources. It's an electric run plant. So now we're able to also drive more clean energy into water production. When it was linked before to conventional, now RO plants can operate using clean energy sources. And the UAE today, even though being an oil and gas producing country with abundant conventional energy source, we can reach, I think in winter, up to 40 to 50% clean energy in our grid. So we are making huge drives into introducing clean energy into our energy infrastructure. And we are home today to 2 of the largest PV plants on the planet at the lowest cost. So we're not, to your point, how do we produce affordable, sustainable, right, and secure energy, and at the same time now, because of the nexus, affordable, secure, and sustainable water, we are able to do that using low-cost, renewable, sustainable energy connected to independent RO plants. So we're able to solve and potentially completely decarbonize water production. So that's kind of the area where we're striving to, and we aim to have, we produce over 1 billion imperial gallons per day of water, which is huge, and we aim to have over 60% of that capacity coming from reverse osmosis technology by 2030. So, and we as a company are committed to net zero by 2050 with interim targets, absolute targets in between. So this is also going to play a very important role to how we can achieve those targets.
Thank you so much, Farid. You highlighted the nexus between energy and water, and that kind of makes me think of a question that I wanted to ask Adrien on, if you look at those science-based targets, how do you build that nexus between water and climate, both on the adaptation and the mitigation side? I always say that, climate change expresses itself through water, but how do you also build that connection between climate and nature? And how do you build that connection between climate, water, and agriculture? Because today is also Agriculture Day.
That's a lot of questions.
You can do it.
I'll try. So we talked. I talked earlier about how SBTN is replicating this approach on climate for other planetary boundaries, and of course, water is one of the planetary boundaries. It's in the red, but you're right. It's not separate from the climate discussion, not at all. In fact, I think if we look at why we are worried about climate change, a lot of it is about water, right? It's about water in terms of the changing patterns of where it's raining and when it's raining, and increased extreme weather events are very much about water as well, right? And the floods that are caused by those changing weather patterns. It's about sea level rise. It's all very connected to water. So when we build more resilient water strategies, really we're building a very big chunk of our climate adaptation strategy, right? So it is definitely very connected. On the nature side, I would like to highlight that you know, we have 3 broad biomes. We have the terrestrial biomes, we have the freshwater biomes, and then we have the marine biomes. And freshwater is a very important one, very small compared to the 2 others, but very rich. And unfortunately, it's the one that has suffered the most the past 50 years. Right, so WWF publishes the Living Planet report every couple of years, and it consistently shows that that's where biodiversity is declining the fastest, up to 90% for tropical freshwater systems. So it is where nature is suffering the most. And it is, of course, again, I was mentioning earlier, water is a shared resource between ecosystems, between local communities, and also agri-industry. Those are all connected, right? If we have ecosystems that don't function, that also means, no wetlands mean less of a buffer for the droughts and floods, and no natural filtering of the water that helps us to more affordably get clean water. And so this is all connected. Agriculture, last point, is obviously the number one activity. I don't want to say sector, because I think there is agri in everything that we buy and everything that we do. But the agri activities, which we need for our food, for our clothes, for this is what's using more than 70% of the water that we use. So it will be heavily impacted wherever water patterns change. It is also in many places very ill-equipped and poorly financed, right? We have a lot of places where it's a lot of smallholder farmers who will need help, both technical assistance, financing to prepare and transform. So agri is the place to start. And it's not only about smallholder farmers, it's also big corporates who don't necessarily have full visibility of their suppliers and the supplies of their suppliers, who are at risk in their agri activities, because they're using a lot of water in water-stressed areas, and increasingly water-stressed areas with climate change.
Thank you, Adrien. A lot of the nexuses, actually, Sabesp is doing that right now with a few different initiatives, and I want to highlight one in particular, Integrecite, a $1 billion investment program that you launched this year, so congratulations on that. Would be great for you, maybe Virginia, to share a little bit with the audience what that program is about, to what extent it can really help achieve your mission, which is providing those water services, but also enhance water quality data monitoring, and then at the same time make sure that you mitigate your environmental and social impact.
This is a project that is tackle not only the resilience agenda, let's say, but also the mitigation agenda, because nowadays we know that the polluted rivers are emission of methane are, so far, greater than, the sewage treatment plants. So actually this program started in 1992 because we had a river that is crossing São Paulo city, which is called Tietê River. So, and then the story of this project, it came with, the massive growth that São Paulo has experienced in the last 30 years. So we start with an investment around $3.5 billion with initiatives that was focused previously in the river to try to, collect the water and let the water, goes through with this infrastructure, go to the sewage treatment plants. So with the experiences that we were gathering with this program, we realized that we need actually to go to the most vulnerable places, especially those that was in the places that was we wasn't regular in the regularization in terms of real estate. So we have there's a lot of places that was keeping growing in São Paulo without the proper land use of the land. And so we decided to make a turn in this project in 2019 and, make a massive amount of, deploying infrastructure to these most vulnerable areas, especially in a place that in São Paulo is one of the most, biggest slum that calls Paraisópolis. So we made investment around $400 million. And we had made also a 650 million new connections. 6,500 new collections. So, and throughout this 30 years of project, we have impacted more, 12 million of people with new infrastructure and the possibility to have clean water and sewage treatment. So the next step of this program, we were aiming to invest more $5.3 billion to cover all the river, and we expect to have the most, or let's say the greatest program of the polluted river, human river in Latin America, maybe comparison with the Sena River and the Thames River, as an example of successful project on this field. So this is a project that we just launched this year, 2023, in the partnership with the state government of São Paulo. So we had not only Sabesp work in this project, but all others state agencies that look for different aspects of this project to make sure that we're going to be successful in the future. We will deliver in the next 5 years to São Paulo this clean river that can make possible the reintegration of the city with the environment. Let's say so. Just to mention at last that we have also have. How can I say that? Effluent, yes, an effluent river that is called Pinheiros River that we have already deployed to the São Paulo city, cleaned. So if you go there, and I invite you, everyone has a chance to visit São Paulo once, to go to Pinheiros River to see how can now have, bicycle rides and, people, just having, a great time alongside of the river, and also bars. So we have, like, for example, Heineken just launched a floating bar there. So how now we have, this fully integrated river. It is not only for the population that, have the opportunity to use the river as reintegrating the city, but also we know that now a lot of people that haven't had access to the sewage treatment, now they have. So that's as I mentioned, we are looking for the next 50 years, to make sure that São Paulo City will be a model in South America.
Thank you so much, Virginia. And we all look forward to seeing the progress in the next couple of years, particularly at COP30 in Brazil, and to see how this initiative would have had evolved by then. So thanks again for that. Michael, based on what Virginia said, and also based on what Adrien said, particularly regarding the science-based target, how do you think companies should think about setting the science-based target for fresh water and make sure that those targets align with their broader sustainability goals?
Thank you. Let me first address the question. I don't think they are different in approach, and I don't think they run counter to each other. In fact, we believe that it is complementary. I think water should be part of any sustainability story. And I think we have been hearing that water is the engine of sustainability. So I think it is not divergent. And I think, like in Singapore's case, I think we are fully conscious that like you, our sources are very energy intensive. Therefore, it is paramount that we start looking at how we can reduce and play our part. Although I must qualify that water just contributes a very, very small part in the energy consumption of Singapore. But we must do our part. Therefore, I think for us, if we hope to peak our emission by 2025 and be net zero by 2050. And we have a strategy. The idea is just to replace as much, like what you say, try to find greener energy instead of fuel or gas. We try to reduce as much the energy that's needed for our water treatment processes. You spoke about 4. That's amazing. I think we got much to learn from you. And you know, every time we keep challenging that call. And the last one, I think perhaps is also interesting. We are also trying to remove CO2 and do our part for, in fact, we just call a challenge to see how we can have such processes in our desalination. We just launched a call in 2021, and now we are piloting some technologies. If there's one advice that I would share, perhaps from the utilities perspective, I know there are some utilities and operators here. I think many of the leading utilities and operators such as yourself have been very open to the industry. I think we don't see ourselves as you against me. There are many things that we can jointly do. And by being open and have clear targets, it's probably easier for the companies to make long-term investment, to make long-term plans, long-term strategy in how to address some of the big challenges that we face. So therefore, I think for us, it is important to have such targets. We set our vision, we set our what's next. Therefore, then we can start planning long-term. And before I hand this mic back to you, I just wanted to shout out to a very special organization, Yumiko. She's from the Asia Pacific Water Forum. I think she leads a wonderful secretariat that helps a lot of Asia Pacific countries to meet their challenges, be it water, be it wastewater. Please speak to her. I think she has most answers to your questions. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the shout out, Michael. And again, because we have such an informed and knowledgeable audience, you'll get a chance to interact with our panelists shortly. I want to go to Farid next. My first question to you focused more on your activities in the UAE, but we know that with your companies, you actually have operations in like 11 core countries, and even if I include everything, it's like more than like 20, 30 countries. How should companies deal with, you know, very diverse geographical operations and still implement scalable, and maybe that's the tough word here, affordable water solution? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think this touches on a point that is very important to the UAE. When you come to water, as you know, as I mentioned, the GCC, particularly in Middle East in general, is water stress, so we're very close to the topic. So we've also been working very hard on how do we address this water scarcity problem, as well as also now, how do we address the issues of global emissions and climate change. But there are other factors that come into play. So I've talked about technology, but there are others. So one of the principal success factors of the UAE and a principle that TAQA has adopted and many companies in the UAE have adopted is partnership and collaboration. We will not be able to solve this alone. Everybody has something to contribute. We bring technology, know-how, and structuring of deal capabilities and financing from all over the world to be able to achieve to bring together the most efficient solutions to these problems. So the UAE would not have been built, and our projects in general as TAQA would not have been built without this spirit of collaboration. So when I talk about solving, or what role do we have to play in the international field, is as the world now today, as you mentioned, is starting to see increased water scarcity and stress all over the world, we now have an opportunity to bring these solutions and these partnerships to solving these problems in places where these problems didn't exist maybe in the past, might have been a little bit less of a problem and becoming more of an issue today. And you will hopefully hear more about this formally and how we're doing that. So partnerships, critical. Technology, essential. And using RO technology today, bringing desalination in a more affordable, more efficient way, and more sustainable way is going to also probably lend itself to helping in other places where this solution will be required. But as well, because as we are a business, we also bring capital and financing. And our ability to bring financiers from all over the world, right, who are interested and not interested but keen to invest in these technologies and these kind of solutions, we're able then to funnel that to all the places that we also are looking to invest in these kind of technologies. Last but not least as well is because we're a vertically integrated or value chain integrated utility, especially in water. Recently we acquired a company called SWS, which also, as Virginia was talking about, that is specialized on wastewater treatment and water reuse. So I've talked about water generation, but with SWS, we close the loop on water. So we're generating the water, we're transmitting it to the customers, but then we're collecting it and we're also treating it and reusing it and then fully closing the loop and offering that closed loop, water loop solution. And through our presence overseas, we're able to bring that portfolio, right, and make it available for other host countries and nations to be able to address their water issues, scarcity issues.
Thank you very much, Farid. You mentioned technology, wastewater, and then the third pillar was on partnership and collaboration. I want to kind of like double down on that last point because I find that one of the very surprising and positive things that I saw at the UN Water Conference this year was this idea of partnership across the board, partnership at the river basin, partnership between different facilities, between different companies. That is pretty new in the water space at that scale, and I think it is poised to grow, and I think it's also a realization that there is not one company or one local government entity that can move the needle on water without collaborating and partnering with others. So I want to ask each and every one of you, can you give us an example of a successful public-private partnership or initiative on the water side that has contributed to effective water management? And if you don't have an existing example, something that you would like to see. I'll start with you, Adrien, and then I'll go to Virginia.
Sure. So one example that comes to mind, which is a piece that I worked on a few years back, is a funding facility called the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development. And that was a partnership between WWF, FMO, the development bank, part of the development bank in the Netherlands, and some commercial banks as well, looking at how can we identify key landscapes where there are severe water issues across the world, and can we identify a number of projects, investable projects, or almost investable projects across those river basins, those landscapes, that will individually improve the resilience of the local utility, of the farmers, of the local manufacturing companies, but collectively also change the water system in a way that makes it more sustainable for the ecosystem, for the people. And what was really interesting was that on many, so we needed the different stakeholders because we needed the development bank to bring some grants and some concessional loans to sweeten the pill, but we also needed local banks in those landscapes who have the capillarity there and who can sort of multiply the impact of the development bank by sort of chipping in and dispersing locally the loans to the local farmers, the local plants, etc. We needed the WWF and other agencies to provide technical support as well. And the technical support, I thought, was the most insightful learning, that there were actually a number of things that weren't being done that were not just not being done because people had no knowledge of emerging technologies or no knowledge of ability to get funding. So things like, for example, textile plants, dyeing plants that were creating sort of water pollution, water stress. We realized that there were new technologies that were available and that those had a payback period of a couple of years. So it was super investable. It enabled them to reduce how much water they use, reduce how much energy they use, and so it reduced their cost. But these were technologies that either they weren't aware of or they didn't have the knowledge that they could get funding for this. And so, you know, we thought we would have to bring a lot of grants and things to fund things that weren't bankable, but there were actually many bankable, investable things that were just not happening there because the information was not available.
Thanks, Adrien. Virginia, your turn.
So I think collaboration and partnership are crucial, especially to do it in a more efficient and faster way, let's say. And I may mention, like, for example, the Integrate program. It's a program that we are conducting in partnership, let's say, and broadly collaboration with the São Paulo state government. And also, as Farid was mentioned about closing the loop of the water treatment. So we just launched a program which in Sabesp that is called Sustainable Sanitation Solutions. That we are aimed to turn our sewage treatments and a full reuse treatment plan. So we have already partnership with private companies that are treating our sludge and also are capturing our methane to transform it in a biogas and other usage. So we are working to enhance this program. So with, you know, open innovation programs and also call for all the private companies that are interested to work with us to develop all these technologies. And I can mention also partnership that we have with NGOs, especially in the social fields, to make sure that when we go to a specific vulnerable place, we are tackle and we are looking to their necessities and all the programs and projects that they already have there. As you may know, that São Paulo is a big city, so all these places, they also had, you know, these own projects that are going on. So we don't want to, you know, just go there and make some different. We want to make sure that we are talking the same language and we are addressing the necessities that this population really have. And also, I can mention that we are in partnering with the UNFCCC here, and as a case model of the adaptation division. And we are the only company in Brazil that has this partnership. So for us, it was a great pleasure to initiate, you know, this collaboration project towards to COP30 in Brazil. So we are looking to develop in 2024 and 2025, a lot of projects here to bring the water discussion and especially the Global South necessities to this more broadly international discussion. So let's say that collaboration is the key to access all this potential.
Thank you, Virginia. That's very exciting. I've been covering COP since the Paris one, so that's 2015. And I think at the time, it was like not even imaginable to think of a collaboration between a utility and the UNFCCC. So it's great to see that transition and that evolution over the years, and looking forward to seeing what it's going to look like. Michael, any successful examples you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I'm just repeating what my esteemed colleagues are sharing, but we have been a firm believer of the PPP model. We have been doing it as early as the early 2000s. In fact, our water recycling plant, our desalination plant now are based on a PPP model. Perhaps I think maybe just 2 points that I thought is relevant from our experience with them. There are 2 things that will help private sector companies. I hope it will help you too. One is that I think we have fairly long visions which we share with the private sector. I think that is critical because I think once you have a shared common vision, It allows both sides to do it. And I think in terms of sustainability, I think it's a better model where we project long-term into the future. The other thing that is really useful, I think the private sector brings two elements which we have benefited as a utility. One is innovation in terms of technology. I think you talked about it. But the other thing which is really useful is how to mobilize finance in a very, very efficient way. I believe that PPP model has allowed us to do that. And I think with the new instruments that is coming on board and the promise of new financing, new funds, I think it will be just extremely exciting to see how this next chapter of PPP moves forward. So really, that's all I got to say at this point. I think we are a firm believer of PPP models. Over to you.
Farid?
I think, as Michael mentioned, I think the UAE also went through the same. We've been adopting the PPP model for a long time, several decades now, and particularly the utility sector where I am from, and in the UAE specifically, privatization has been the model for the last 2 decades. And that involved also not just privatization using local private companies, but also attracting international partners to invest and attracting foreign investment as well, which has been very successful. And that's what's really driven all of the innovations that we're talking about today, because it's created this melting pot where all of these different ideas and innovations can come together through also investment, particularly long-term horizon, because large-scale utility businesses have high capital expenditure requirements. So you need that security in terms of frameworks and regulations that allow you to recover your investments, over a longer period of time. So that's been a very successful model, and I think the UAE has a lot of examples, whether through renewables deployment, desalination and RO and all of that. We've seen all of these partnerships from companies all the way, Semcorp in Singapore, Jinko from China, all the way to EDF, Marubeni in Japan, EDF from France and US. We've got GE, we've got Mitsubishi from Japan as well. We've got all of the international players, all heavily invested into the story and development here in UAE and of the success of the PPP model. And we will continue ourselves as TAQA to take that successful model everywhere else. I believe, if you ask me what do I want to see even coming out of COP, is as the world now goes through a new phase of localization versus globalization, I want to believe to say that TAQA and UAE will remain the anchor to maintain that spirit of collaboration and partnership and globalization, and bring us back, to that place. And I think we're going through that normal cycle, and hopefully we will continue to be, the custodians of the story of collaboration as we go overseas and invest overseas.
Thank you so much, Farid. Would like to hear from some members of the audience. So if you have any questions or just any comments you would like to make, we'll make sure to pass a mic, which is coming from the back. So we're going to take this question here and then this question here, and then we'll go with these two. And maybe quickly introduce yourself if you want to.
Sure. So hi, everyone. This was a really fascinating and frankly very informative panel. My name is Christine. I am currently a socioeconomic rights researcher. Most of my experience has been on Yemen. So I want to ask a little bit about the region that we're in. And I love that there's been this focus on partnership and sort of thinking about our neighbors. And I really would like to hear from all the panelists, but I think particularly Farid, I'd like to hear from you. In terms of where we're looking at fragile contexts, where it might be hard, for example, to find bankable projects, I'm curious as to what you see the kind of key challenges are to either securing investments, pushing investments, or figuring out how to get grants before the investments to secure something like water infrastructure. And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about, so I was just in Yemen and there was a lot of conversation about desalination. There wasn't that much conversation about how they would afford desalination, how they would actually have the energy needed to run the plants. And there was much less conversation about other things like wastewater treatment, sustainable use. So I'd be just really curious for the panel to kind of take on least developed countries, fragile contexts, vulnerable contexts, and sort of take what you're talking about and think about the challenges and potential solutions in these places.
Thank you, Kristen. We'll just take the second question first, so that'll give Farid some time to think about his answer. Could we bring the mic to the first row? Awesome.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Sanjeev Chadha. I work with different organizations. I'm the vice chairman of the Pacific Institute as well. Michael, my question is to you. I am familiar with the great work that Singapore has done. And in my view, it's one of the countries, albeit small, but which has got a really holistic strategy with which you are combating the water challenge for your country. And if I remember right, you have a very long-term strategic plan which you're working towards as well, 2050, if I recall correctly. My question is, how is the progress along that strategic plan? And what are a couple of lessons which you have, based on your experience, for the other cities and countries around the world when it comes to holistic water management?
Maybe we'll start with Farid for the first question, and then we'll go to Michael.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
I don't think we'll target it on me alone, but I'll take a first hack at it. I think you're hitting on an important point, which is that the issue is global, and not every country in the world might be in the best place to attract the right attention to immediately start solving the problems. But I think like the UAE story, where there's a will and a will for action, there is a way. So I think it has to be a collaborative story. So all of these nations have to also help their partners in trying to solve this story by creating the right environment where the right finance can come in, the right technology partners are able to come in, and then able to collaborate to solve that problem. And we've, I think, as TAQA Group, even through our affiliate Masdar, have made a lot of efforts to solving a lot of these issues, whether through energy or water scarcity, through various channels, whether through government funding or whether if the right frameworks are in place, through attracting international finance to be able to develop those projects. So there's more than one channel and there's more than one stakeholder in this matter that have to all collaboratively, right, have the same agenda and objectives and incentives to be able to solve these problems. And we will then be center to that problem, solving that problem.
Thank you, Farid. Michael, maybe the second question, and then I'll ask.
Thank you for your question. Just want to clarify the second part of your question. The first part is about long-term challenges, and then maybe the second part is talking about adjustment and changes that we want to do. Is that? Yeah, lessons learned. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the question and giving me the chance to talk a little bit more about our long-term plans. In Singapore's case, just to add on to your point, actually when we planned, it was for 2061. It was 100 years. And there's a reason for that, because when we started off as an independent country, we depended on Malaysia for water. And when we signed the agreement, it was for 100 years. So clearly, we are taking almost half of our water from Malaysia. So imagine, come that day, half your water stops flowing, possibly. Then what do we do? It really sets your mind thinking long term. What we have done is, I think our planners, our officials, our industries, I think we're all clear with their vision. So I think a common vision really helps the mind. And therefore, when we started planning, we have this long-term plan, but we also have 5-year intermediate plans that we do, that we continue to update, what we call our water master plan. And that guides a few things for us. For example, our tariff, our long-term investment. So that helps us. So I think these are structural things that we have benefited from having a long-term, really hard challenge. And occasionally, we get interrupters or new enablers. Like for example, a few years ago, we wouldn't have seen recycling, closing the water loop as an enabler. But in the early 2000s, it had helped burst. And then that provided some security for PUB. So like, for example, we are a firm believer that recycling is a way for us to go. But as now we look ahead, there are new challenges ahead. So just in case you think that we reduce the thing by 2 times, we must also remember that our population, our economy is going to grow. So at 2061, we forecast that our water consumption is going to be 4 times of what we need today. So if you need 4 times of what water you need today, you need to also manage 4 times the sludge that you produce, 4 times the resources that you produce. It really gets the mind thinking. So I think maybe one of the lessons that we learned was really looking forward helps, but I think we were prepared to be nimble, to adjust our plans well. It sounds cliche-ish, but every day it goes about us reviewing our plans. It really sounds cliche-ish, but I just wanted to say that we can't help but to review our plans almost every day. So there's perhaps it doesn't do justice to the 3,300 men of PUB, but I just wanted to give a very short answer to your very difficult question. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michael. We have 3 more questions, so I'm gonna go with, actually 4 now. Okay, so let me take 3 and then I'll take the other one. There was a first question here, and then one in the back, and then I'll go to Adrien.
Thank you very much. My name is Kadiva Hamutumwa. I'm from a bulk water utility in the southern part of Africa, Namibia to be specific. It's really good to hear from Dubai as well as Singapore in terms of what you're doing in terms of private-public partnership. And the question I wanted to ask is, how do you manage this, given the fact that water is an enabler to economic development? In our country, water belongs to the state. It is a property of the state, so we haven't privatized it. And I just wanted to understand how you manage this and still make sure that the state has control over water, even though you get into triple Ps. Thank you.
Great one. There's another one in the back.
Thank you very much. My name is Johannes Serunda. I'm also from Namibia, which is in the southern part of Africa, from a bulk water utility, together with my colleague who spoke earlier than me. So mine is directed, Farid, on the issue of technology. So what we have seen as a trend is that the prices are decreasing, but not quite fast on the RO, reverse osmosis, and also together with the PV plants or the PV panels. So, however, even at the current moment, putting those technology together in a developing country, the water is still expensive. So what are the considerations on the issue of partnership and collaboration, which could be maybe enhanced, especially between developed and developing country, to ensure that those technology, in terms of pricing, they become cheaper for the water to be affordable to all the consumers? Thank you very much.
Thanks. We'll take Adrien and then the question in the back.
Thank you. Adrien Sim, I'm Chief Executive of the Alliance for Water Stewardship. Excuse me, Frank, I've got 3 questions, but they're all very quick. Do you agree, this is not directed at anyone in particular, do you agree that, taking a macro level, we require systemic change? Number 2 is, if the answer to that is yes, will we achieve this by focusing on partnerships, given that partnerships are by nature exclusive rather than inclusive? You're either in or you're out. And third question is that a really stupid question? You're okay to say yes to that last one.
Thanks, Adrien. Maybe we'll take that.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Asma El Kasmi. I'm from Morocco. So I actually work for the biggest utility in the country, doing water and electricity in the same time. So very informative, excellent discussion. I'm just missing one part of the whole picture. We've talked about the water energy nexus, but where is food in the middle of all this? I mean, we know that we are in water scarce countries, that at times 85% of the resources are dedicated to agriculture. Today in our countries, we do desal for potable water, drinking water, but also for agriculture. And we're trying to also couple with renewable energies. So I would like to maybe to hear more from this perspective. How do we deal moving forward with the water, energy, food nexus? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I've chaired many panels, and I've been also a speaker on many panels at this COP. And this is the panel where I had the most questions and the most interesting ones. So thank you all. Maybe we'll start with the two questions from Namibia. There was a first question on how do you manage, especially the issue because of water being so precious, how do you make sure that the state is still involved and remains controlled when you extend with private partnerships? Maybe Farid first. Michael, who wants to take this?
I think it's
a joint one?
Joint answer, because the solution is, as we've seen in the UAE, you have to bring all the stakeholders around the table to agree on what is the merits for maybe any change that you want to achieve, right? In your case, you're saying water is a property of the state. So why would you want to change that? Unless you're trying to attract foreign investment, as you mentioned, and therefore then it brings that to challenge. But then in that case, the solution is not one party solution. No one party that can give the answer to the question. There's the government or the state regulator that has to come in, as well to put the right framework of regulations that maybe preserves any protections or rights that or risks that the government sees, and maybe giving away, that ownership, and then being able to trade it off for the attraction and investment that they're looking for, right? So it's actually not one party, but it's actually a conversation that has to be around the table with all the stakeholders there to understand what framework needs to be put in place, and it's very contextual, right? Every country might have its own, perception on the risks and the merits, right? And then that conversation then helps, arrive at probably the solution that is needed. But yeah, and I think that's how both countries have solved the PPP problem.
I think your question really hits the nail on its head, in the sense that there's always competing needs. I think the businesses obviously have their needs, the utilities, the agencies, the regulators, the government have their needs. So I think over time, like what my esteemed colleague here have said, we have developed an understanding where actually no one is worse off, right? And the PPP solutions that we worked on, I think given the long-term contracts, it allows the company to have a reasonable return on their work. And likewise for us as a utility, we can harvest the benefits from the partnership. So it has proven that, I think that there are many cases like UAE, I think there are many countries around the world, Hong Kong, Taiwan, where you have seen benefits of the model. And I think we'd be happy to share more. I think the one thing I wanted to advocate was perhaps maybe relating to this point, there's a lot of misconception about PPP models. And if really somebody, perhaps maybe at a multilateral bank or agency, to kind of have maybe a module in class or something where we can actually teach people about PPP models, I think that would be helpful. I think Tai spoke to me about this. As I was walking up the stairs, she said that, is there a competition between the government and the private sector? I say, absolutely not. Right? So therefore, I think there's a fair bit of misconception. And I think if there's something that I would advocate really is some organization that would champion the cause of sharing the merits and perhaps the learnings, like what our gentleman has said about PPP models. There's a lot of misunderstanding out there. Thank you.
I can add also something about Brazil, what we are facing now. And I think just add a point here about the contract modeling, which is very important for the success of this PPP model. So also in Brazil, we had a lot of discussions about the regulatory framework and how the public institutions can help, to build up this contract and how can we guarantee the transparency and the correct accountability of this long-term contract to make sure that we can, make more close the private sector with the public and make sure that all the big investments that we have to make in Brazil, that I'm pretty sure that are very alike with the problems that you have also in Africa, can be tackled.
Thank you so much, Virginia. I just want to mention also on this that Brazil is indeed looking at a lot of concessions in the space. So I think it's a topic that is becoming top of mind. There was a question on technology. So maybe I'll go to you because I think it was directed to you directly, Farid. So especially when water is still expensive for communities. So how would you tackle that?
I think, for example, I'll use the example of, let's say, Masdar, our affiliate. When they started investing in solar technology, nobody thought it was commercial. But they took the risk because they understood that there's a long-term benefit and a long-term target as a government, UAE government, to introduce these sustainable renewable energy sources into the energy mix. And I think what we've seen from that example is prices, as more and more capital is deployed and more projects are done and more people, supply chains, manufacturers get involved, prices start to drop, right, through economies of scale. So I think what you're talking about is maybe you're talking about a price point in time. But I think the more work and investment goes into specific technologies and sectors, the more you will see prices go down over the long term. And I mean, obviously there'll be undulations in over time, ups and downs. But general trend is that technologies that have or are deployable on a global to solve a global problem will, as more people get involved, see prices go down.
Awesome. I'm going to ask Adrien to answer Adrien's question, or questions, plural.
Thank you. I can start, Adrien. I don't think it's a stupid question. I definitely think there's a need for profound systemic change. I would agree with that. Actually, I'd like to give an example from a very recent experience implementing the SBTN methods, water methods, for a couple of pharmaceutical companies. I think it's a really good example because these guys, actually many of them are sourcing active pharmaceutical ingredients from South Asia in places that are very water stressed. And so, they are producing life-saving drugs, very essential, very valuable products for our society. And it is using a lot of water in places where there isn't much water, to the extent that the methods told us, there's a period in the year where you should be reducing the amount of water you're using by 90, 95, 98%. So obviously that requires profound systemic change. They're not going to be able to run their operations the way they are with 2% of the water they've been using so far. So I think that's an illustration of how severe this challenge can be, and it's not just I change my my processes, right? Should I be producing this here? Should I be doing this somewhere else? Are there other activities that are using water in this area that maybe shouldn't be there? But at the same time, it's challenging, right? Because they are there and they're creating employment and supporting livelihoods. So going back to SBTN, that's why the AR3T approach, right? I think we were talking about it before you arrived on avoid and reduce, but also restore, generate, and transform. And I think the transform is really important, and that's about largely about governance change and profoundly changing the way that we manage water. Another experience with a southern African country, a few years back, working with all the stakeholders in South Africa. We're working with the water ministry, but also with water users, NGOs, etc. And the answer that came out, I thought was quite representative. It's not that we don't need partnerships, it's that we need everything. We need partnerships, we need governance change in terms of what do we use water for, how do we price water, but we need all of the above if we really want this situation to be manageable.
We have 3 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we tackle the question from Morocco, which is a brilliant question. You're right, 70% of fresh water is being used in agriculture. I talk to a lot of farmers association, and sometimes they like to challenge that figure, and I always tell them, you don't have to challenge that figure at all. It's a good thing that agriculture is using the most water, thank God. It would be awkward for industry to use more water than agriculture. But then you have a question as to how do you deal with that nexus when the resources are going down and the needs are going up, particularly in countries like Morocco. Any views on that particular question as we are celebrating the Food, Ag, and Water Day here at COP?
I think maybe because Morocco is close to me as well. So we actually have, we own TAQA Morocco, which is the biggest utility in Morocco. We produce over 40% of the energy requirements of the Kingdom of Morocco. And we've been very close to the story, proudly. But Morocco, historically, I mean, in my mind, was never a country challenged by water scarcity as much as the rest of the Middle East, but has, at your point, until now, and what we've mentioned is water scarcity and drought has become more of a problem for places that never experienced them before. And that's where, for example, we as TAQA, being in a place where water scarcity was a problem before, and we have been working very closely at trying to address these problems, that's where we then start lending our expertise. To your question, how do companies that exist in multiple geographies contribute to the solution? And this is what we do, right? So now this problem has been a problem for us for a long time. It's becoming more of a problem for you. And this is where now us as a company, and obviously a lot of other companies in this field, become in a position to partner, right? For example, with countries to address these problems, knowing our history and track record in being able to solve these problems. So we look forward to trying to partner with the Kingdom, inshallah, to help address these issues.
I'll maybe then complete this as I close out the panel. Great question. Maybe three points for you to keep in mind. Number one is I think it's a matter of prioritization. It is not yet kind of like all the way up in terms of the priorities for the government. And you're right, it's because the issue as it is now is fairly recent for how bad it is. So I think, putting it up at the top of the policy agenda is of critical importance. The second one is going to be difficult choices, right? We know that in many countries in the Maghreb, there's a huge production of avocado. Does that make sense to kind of like go ahead and produce crops that are so water intensive, right? Even when they bring so much money, especially for countries who are also dealing with economic development, right? So those difficult discussions will need to be had. And then maybe the last one, and it's kind of like a link with Farid's point, is like thinking through what are the big partnerships that you can think about so that you can crowd it finance and you can crowd it technical expertise to make sure that you're able to solve the crisis before it gets too bad. We are at time. I want to say a big, big thank you to our fantastic panelists, Adrien, Virginia, Michael, Farid. Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you. Thank you so much. Great audience, great questions. A big shout out to the folks who are joining us virtually. And a big, big thank you to the entire team working in the back to make this happen. And we hope to see you very soon. Take care.